The crowd roared, their voices echoing across the vast arena. The heat from the blazing twin suns of Zaroth Prime beat down on the sand below. This was the Karrick Arena, the largest and most famous fighting grounds in the galaxy. Spectators from all corners of the universe gathered here, drawn by the promise of blood and spectacle. Today, however, the spectacle wasn't the usual display of brute force. Today was different. At the center of the arena stood Rixara, a four-eyed alien warrior. She was tall, with smooth silver-blue skin that shimmered under the harsh sun. Her four eyes glistened, two on each side of her head, scanning the surroundings with precision. A blade, nearly as tall as she was, rested against her shoulder, its edges reflecting the light in a deadly sheen. Despite her formidable appearance, Rixara was not the one the crowd had come to cheer for. She wasn't the favorite. The murmurs began immediately. As Rixara took her position, the audience shifted uneasily in their seats, casting mocking glances her way. "Four eyes, how ridiculous," one alien whispered to another. "She's a freak of nature. She thinks she can be a gladiator with that face," another voice added, followed by laughter. Rixara ignored them. It wasn't the first time she'd heard such words. Her species, the Vashtari, had evolved with four eyes to see the world in a way others could not. It gave them an advantage in combat, an edge she'd used to become one of the deadliest fighters in the arena. But that same gift was also what made her the subject of mockery. She had long since learned to block out the cruelty of the crowd. Their laughter, their jeers, they meant nothing. She was here for one reason: to fight, to prove herself. Today she would silence them all with her skill. The arena's announcer, a loud and booming voice, echoed over the speakers. "And now, our next contestant, the Vashtari warrior, Rixara, the one who has risen through the ranks, earning the respect of even the most brutal gladiators." A few people clapped half-heartedly, but the applause was drowned out by the taunting. Rixara stepped forward, her heart steady, her mind focused. She had trained for this moment her entire life. The crowd's opinion did not matter. Only her ability to survive and win did. Across from her stood her opponent for the day, a massive alien called Gralgar, a hulking figure with thick green skin and tusks protruding from his jaw. He was an experienced fighter, a crowd favorite, and known for his brutal attacks. His mere presence caused a stir in the crowd, and for a moment it seemed as though they had forgotten about Rixara. Gralgar looked her up and down, sneering. At her. "Are you ready to lose, little alien?" he growled, his voice like gravel scraping against metal. Rixara didn't respond. Instead, she tightened her grip on her weapon. Her mind was calm, her eyes sharp. Gralgar might have strength, but she had precision, speed, and the advantage of her four eyes. She had learned to see everything around her at once, to anticipate her opponent's movements before they happened. She would not let his insults distract her. The signal to begin the fight sounded, the clang of a metal gong echoing like a death knell. Gralgar charged at her with a terrifying roar, swinging his massive club. The crowd gasped, watching with bated breath. The blow was powerful enough to crush stone, but Rixara was already moving. She sidestepped with lightning speed, her four eyes tracking his every motion. She countered with a quick slash of her blade, the edge singing through the air, narrowly missing Gralgar's side. But she wasn't aiming for a fatal strike. Not yet. The goal was to wear him down, to make him underestimate her. He would soon learn that his brute strength meant nothing against her agility. Gralgar swung again, faster this time, but Rixara was already behind him. She used her speed, darting around him, reading his every move. He swung again, but she ducked low, sweeping his feet from under him with a quick strike of her blade. The crowd was beginning to take notice. The jeers had stopped, replaced by confused murmurs. Rixara's technique was unlike anything they'd seen before. Her four eyes allowed her to predict Gralgar's next move before he even knew it himself. Every slash, every dodge was calculated. Every move was precise, but it wasn't enough to win yet. Gralgar was strong. He didn't go down easily. Gralgar growled, rising to his feet with a savage snarl. "You're faster than I thought, Four Eyes," he sneered, wiping the blood from his lip. "But you can't outrun me forever." He swung again, this time with both hands putting all his weight into the attack. Rixara parried, but the force sent her back several paces. She stumbled, but quickly regained her footing. She couldn't let him land a blow like that again. Gralgar advanced, his movements becoming more reckless. The crowd watched, holding their breath, unsure of who would emerge victorious. Rixara's body was bruised, but she wasn't finished. She knew that every fight had a turning point, and she was waiting for it. As Gralgar lunged forward, thinking he had her cornered, Rixara moved like a shadow. She dodged beneath his swing and with a quick motion brought her blade up to strike. In one swift move, she aimed for the gap in his armor, cutting through his defenses. The crowd gasped in shock as Gralgar cried out in pain, falling to his knees. For the first time, there was silence in the arena. Rixara stood over him, her breathing steady, her four eyes staring down at the defeated gladiator. The crowd was now silent, the mocking whispers replaced with stunned silence. She had done it. She had proven that it wasn't the number of eyes that mattered, but the skill behind them. The announcer's voice broke the silence. And the winner is Rixara, the Vashtari warrior. But Rixara wasn't celebrating. She didn't need the crowd's approval. What mattered was that she had won, and as she looked out at the spectators, she knew she had earned their respect. She wasn't just a freak, she was a warrior, and this was only the beginning. The roar of the crowd slowly began to settle after the fierce battle. The cheers for Rixara's victory echoed through the arena, but there was something different about this fight, something that felt new. For the first time, Rixara stood at the center of attention, not as the outsider, not as the one with four eyes, but as a true champion. As the arena staff moved in to clear the fallen gladiators, Rixara remained standing, her blade resting at her side. She glanced around, catching the eyes of several spectators who had once mocked her. They were no longer laughing. They were looking at her differently now, with respect. And it felt strange. But it was the feeling of victory that filled her chest. However, just as the atmosphere began to shift, a new presence entered the arena. A human. Dressed in simple combat attire, he stepped out from the shadows of the grandstands, his eye patch glinting in the harsh sunlight. His name was Captain Derek Nash, and he was no stranger to battle. Rixara's four eyes immediately locked onto him. There was something different about this human, something that made him stand out even in the midst of this alien-filled arena. He wasn't tall or broad-shouldered like some of the other gladiators. In fact, he was much shorter than many of them, and his face was marked with a scar that ran across his left cheek, a reminder of the wars he'd fought in. But it wasn't his size or his scars that drew attention. It was the way he carried himself. A quiet confidence that told Rixara this human had seen more than his fair share of bloodshed. As Derek entered the arena, the crowd fell silent, their eyes turning to him. Whispers spread like wildfire through the stands. "Who is this human?" someone asked. "Is he here to fight?" Rixara stood tall, sensing a shift in the air. She wasn't sure why this human's presence unsettled her, but she felt something deep within her, the feeling of challenge, of something more coming. Derek made his way to the center of the arena. With each step, the crowd seemed to grow more curious. He stood still for a moment, surveying the vast space, his good eyes scanning the stands. Then he spoke, his voice clear and calm, reaching every corner of the arena. "I've seen the battles, the victories, the losses," Derek said, "but I've never seen true courage like this." His words were aimed at Rixara, and though the crowd did not know it yet, he had come to offer her something more than mere praise. Rixara stiffened, surprised by his sudden acknowledgement. The way he looked at her was different, respectful, even. It was rare for anyone to see beyond her four eyes and treat her like a warrior first. Derek continued, his words carrying through the silence. "I want to face the strongest fighter in this arena, and I want to do it right now." The crowd gasped, and Rixara's heart skipped a beat. Was this human challenging her? Did he see her as the strongest? Or was he just another arrogant outsider, thinking he could win by fighting the most dangerous alien gladiator? He turned, his gaze directly toward her. "I choose you, Vashtari warrior," he said. His voice held no mockery, no arrogance, just a quiet determination. The arena erupted with noise once again, gasps, laughter, whispers. They were all asking the same question. What was this human thinking? Rixara's eyes narrowed and she instinctively gripped her blade tighter. She had never faced a human in battle before. Most humans were not considered fighters in this arena. They were diplomats, explorers, or traders, but rarely warriors. This one, however, had a presence that made her hesitate. As if sensing her hesitation, Derek reached for his weapon, a sleek, simple blade that rested at his side. His fingers brushed against the hilt and he took a deep breath as if preparing for... The sun above the arena blazed as Rixara and Derek faced each other, their blades drawn, their eyes locked in intense focus. The crowd, which had once mocked Rixara for her 4 eyes, now stood in hushed silence. No one knew what to expect. This wasn't just any fight. This was a battle that was quickly becoming the talk of the arena. Derek's presence was like a calm in the middle of a storm. His movements were measured, his posture steady, and every step he took was filled with purpose. Rixara, on the other hand, was a whirlwind. Her 4 eyes tracked every shift in his movements, every subtle change in the air. She was fast, faster than most, but this human was no easy opponent. She circled him, testing him with quick strikes. Her blade cut through the air with deadly precision, aiming for weak points, trying to find an opening. But Derek was ready. Every time she struck, he blocked or dodged with skill that made her pause. There was no arrogance in his actions, just the quiet confidence of a man who had seen countless battles. "You're faster than I thought," Derek said, his voice calm but with a hint of admiration. Rixara's eyes narrowed. "You're not bad yourself," she replied, her tone sharp. She had fought countless warriors, but this human was unlike any she had faced before. He wasn't just trying to survive, he was making her think, making her work for every move. The crowd, once filled with mockery, now whispered in awe. They had never seen such a fight before. 2 gladiators, one with 4 eyes and the other with only one, locked in combat. The arena had come alive with the energy of their struggle. Rixara wasn't used to being pushed like this. In the past, she had always had the upper hand. Her 4 eyes gave her an advantage in seeing her opponent's moves before they made them. But Derek was different. He didn't rely on brute strength or flashy moves. He relied on something far more dangerous: experience. As the battle raged on, Rixara could feel herself growing more and more impressed. Derek's blade never faltered, his movements graceful and precise. He wasn't just defending, he was countering, pushing her back with every move. For a moment, Rixara felt a twinge of doubt. Was this human really as skilled as he appeared? Or was it just her own exhaustion clouding her judgment? Her thoughts were interrupted when Derek suddenly lunged forward, his blade aimed directly at her. Rixara barely had time to react. She twisted away, the edge of his blade grazing her side, but she couldn't escape entirely. Pain flared through her as his strike found its mark, though not deeply enough to wound her seriously. She hissed, more out of frustration than pain. This human was proving to be more than a worthy opponent. Derek stepped back, his breath steady as he watched her. He could see the hint of frustration in her eyes, and it made him pause for a moment. "You're good," he said, his voice steady, "but you don't need to fight like you're the only one in the arena." Rixara was taken aback. Was he really talking about her? The Vashtari warrior who had fought her way to the top of the arena, earning respect from the strongest fighters in the galaxy? She wiped the sweat from her brow, her mind racing. What did he mean? Was it his way of trying to get inside her head? "No one fights alone," Derek continued, his tone softer now. "You've got your 4 eyes, your blade, your strength. But if you keep fighting like it's all about you, you'll lose." Rixara's brow furrowed. She had always fought alone. Her 4 eyes had been both a gift and a curse. They had given her strength, but they had also made her an outsider. She had never needed anyone, but this human was right. She had been fighting as if it were all about proving something to the crowd, to herself. Her four eyes flicked toward him, trying to read his movements. "Are you trying to teach me?" she asked, her voice a mix of confusion and curiosity. Derek nodded slowly. "Not teach, just show you what's possible when you don't have to fight alone." There was a long pause, and in that moment, Rixara realized something. She had been so focused on proving herself that she had never once considered what it might be like to have an ally, someone to fight beside her, not against her. As the realization hit, Rixara found herself moving differently. Her next strike was slower, more deliberate. She wasn't just aiming to land a blow. She was trying to understand her opponent, trying to feel the rhythm of the fight. She realized then that Derek wasn't just a human with one eye. He was a fighter who had mastered the art of battle in a way that was different from her own. Derek, for his part, seemed to notice the shift. He adjusted his stance, his blade ready to meet hers again. But now, he wasn't just anticipating her moves, he was respecting them, respecting her as a warrior, and Rixara felt it, a subtle change in the air, a sense that they were no longer opponents locked in a battle for survival. They were two warriors in the middle of a dance. The next few minutes felt like a blur. Rixara was faster now, more fluid. She moved with a confidence she hadn't felt before, as if Derek's words had unlocked something inside her. She was no longer just using her four eyes to predict his movements. She was understanding them. With a sudden twist of her blade, Rixara disarmed Derek, sending his sword flying from his grasp. The crowd gasped. Rixara didn't stop. She pressed forward, her blade aimed at Derek's chest, but she stopped just in time. Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment there was nothing else in the arena. Derek's face was calm, his body still, but his eyes held a quiet admiration. "You could have killed me," he said, his voice calm, but full of respect. Rixara's grip on her blade tightened. She knew she could have, but there was something inside her that stopped her, a realization that fighting wasn't always about winning, and that perhaps was what made this fight different. The arena was quieter than usual, the crowd still buzzing with the energy of the unexpected fight between Rixara and Captain Derek Nash. As the two warriors stood apart, catching their breath, the spectators shifted in their seats, their eyes still glued to the pair. It had been an extraordinary match, one that no one had expected, and yet there was something about it that had captured the attention of even the most cynical onlookers. Rixara sheathed her blade, her muscles sore but alive with the thrill of the battle. She had won, but not in the way she expected. Derek had pushed her harder than any opponent she had faced in years. His skill was undeniable, and his respect for her had been clear throughout the duel. The crowd, once mocking her for her four eyes, now looked at her differently. It was strange. Rixara had spent so much of her life fighting alone, not just physically, but emotionally. Her four eyes were a blessing in battle, but they had also made her an outsider. In the arenas, she had always been the other, the one who didn't quite fit. Now, for the first time, she felt as if she were part of something bigger. Derek had shown her a side of fighting she had never understood, the respect between warriors, the quiet understanding that went beyond the battlefield. As she made her way out of the arena, the crowd's reaction shifted. The mockery had disappeared, replaced by applause and cheers. The sounds of approval filled the air, and for the first time, Rixara didn't feel like a freak. She felt like a champion, but it wasn't just the crowd that had changed. Rixara's thoughts turned inward as she walked. Her mind replayed every moment of the duel, Derek's calm demeanor, his skill, the way he had respected her during the fight. She had never experienced anything like that before. It was almost as if their duel had been a conversation, one where they spoke without words. She found herself thinking about him, about the bond that had formed during that short, intense battle. The voices of the crowd faded as she stepped through the gates of the arena, and her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar face. It was Jarnus, the head of the arena, a tall, stern-faced Vashtari who had overseen countless battles. He was one of the few who had never mocked her, though his respect had always been more about her skill than her appearance. "You fought well. Today," Jarnus said, his deep voice carrying through the quiet halls. Rixara nodded, her expression unreadable. "Thank you." "There's something different about you, Rixara," Jarnus continued, his gaze steady. "I've seen you fight many times, but today something shifted. I can't put my finger on it, but you were different." Rixara felt a stir of discomfort at his words. She wasn't sure if she wanted to acknowledge the change. Part of her still clung to the idea that she could do this on her own, without needing anyone's help or approval, but another part of her, the part that had fought alongside Derek, knew that something had indeed shifted. "I fought with a human," she said, her voice quiet. He made me see things differently." Jarnus raised an eyebrow. "A human? In the arena?" Rixara nodded, her mind drifting back to the duel. "Yes, his name is Derek Nash. He's not like the others." Jarnus's expression softened, but only slightly. "I see. Well, perhaps this human has more to offer than just his blade." As Rixara walked away, Jarnus's words lingered in her mind. Derek Nash had shown her a different side of combat, a side that involved not just strength but respect, strategy, and trust. She wasn't sure what to make of it, but she knew one thing. She hadn't felt this alive in a long time. Later that day, after the excitement of the fight had faded, Rixara found herself alone in her quarters, her mind replaying every moment of the duel. The applause, the cheers, the respect she had earned from the crowd, it was all so overwhelming. She had spent years fighting in the sun had barely risen on Zeroth Prime, but the arena was already buzzing with energy. The crowd was larger than usual, packed with beings from distant worlds, all eagerly waiting for the next spectacle. Today, however, there was more anticipation in the air than ever before. This wasn't just any fight, it was a moment that would change everything. Rixara stood in the preparation area beneath the grandstands, her hands steady as she adjusted her armor. The sound of the crowd's excitement filtered through the stone walls, but she didn't focus on them. Instead, her thoughts were with the task ahead. The battle she was about to face would be unlike anything she had ever encountered. "Are you ready?" Derek's voice echoed from behind her, low and reassuring. She didn't need to turn around to know he was there. She had grown used to his presence. She nodded without speaking, her mind focused. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the future she was beginning to see in a new light. She had spent so many years fighting for herself, proving she could stand alone. But now she understood that some battles were better fought together. Derek was no longer just a fellow fighter. He had become someone she could rely on. Someone who didn't look at her with disdain or pity, but with respect. "Remember, it's not just about strength," Derek said, stepping closer. "It's about strategy. You've got the advantage, Rixara. You just need to trust yourself." Rixara gave him a small smile, feeling the warmth of his words settle into her chest. She had never had someone who believed in her this way. It was strange, but it also felt right. She took a deep breath and looked up at the arena's entrance. Her opponent was already inside. A massive warlord, Hruck, known throughout the galaxy for his strength and cruelty. He had fought in countless battles and no one had ever been able to defeat him. He was feared, respected, and ruthless. But Rixara wasn't afraid. She had faced fear before. What she was feeling now was something different, something more focused. This battle wasn't about defeating her opponent for the sake of victory. It was about proving that she had something worth fighting for. The signal rang out, and the gates to the arena opened. The roar of the crowd was deafening, the air thick with excitement. Rixara stepped forward, her feet firm against the sand beneath her. Derek was already in the stands, watching her with an unreadable expression. She didn't look back at him, but she could feel his gaze on her, steady, unwavering. As she entered the arena, she could see Hruck standing across from her, a massive figure cloaked in heavy armor. His muscles bulged beneath the dark metal, and his eyes glowed with an intensity that could melt steel. He was everything the crowd had expected, everything they wanted to see in a true gladiator. He was everything Rixara was not. But that She realized was exactly what made this fight hers to win. Hrock sneered as she approached, his voice like gravel. "You think you can defeat me, Four Eyes? You're nothing but a spectacle." Rixara's expression didn't change. She had heard those words before. It was nothing new. What mattered now was her own strength, her own resolve. The announcer's voice rang out across the arena. And now the battle of the century. Hrock, the ruthless warlord versus Rixara, the four-eyed champion. The crowd roared, but Rixara didn't let their cheers distract her. She had a job to do. The warlord lunged first, his massive blade cutting through the air with terrifying speed. Rixara dodged, her four eyes tracking his every movement. She wasn't going to let his size intimidate her. She had learned long ago that size meant little in a fight. It was the mind that mattered, the ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast. Hrock swung again, but this time, Rixara was ready. She blocked his strike with a swift movement of her blade, using the momentum to push him back. The crowd gasped, surprised by her strength. Hrock stumbled for a moment but quickly regained his footing. "You're faster than I thought," he growled, eyes narrowing. "I'm not just fast," Rixara replied, her voice calm but full of focus. "I'm smart." She took a step back, watching him carefully. Hrock was aggressive, but that was exactly what she had expected. He relied too heavily on brute force. And that, she realized, was his greatest weakness. As Hrock charged again, Rixara ducked beneath his swing and moved quickly to the side. She struck his side with precision, but his thick armor absorbed most of the blow. Still, it made him stagger, and Rixara saw the opening she had been waiting for. With a quick movement, she sidestepped and drove her blade into the gap between his shoulder and chest armor. The impact was enough to make Hrock roar in pain, but it wasn't enough to defeat him. Not yet. He spun around, bringing his massive blade down in a deadly arc, aiming to crush her, but Rixara was already moving. She ducked beneath the strike, rolling to the side. Her four eyes saw the next attack coming before it happened. She stood and lunged, catching Hrock off guard with a well-placed strike to his side. This time, the blow was deep, and the crowd gasped in shock. Hrock staggered, but he didn't fall. He was a warrior to the core, and he refused to go down easily. He snarled in anger and swung again, faster than before. But Rixara was ready. She ducked beneath his attack, her mind already planning the next move. She wasn't going to win by sheer force. She had to be smarter than that. Hrock's next swing was wide, and Rixara used the opportunity to close the distance between them. She aimed for his unguarded neck, striking with the full force of her blade. This time she didn't hold back. The blade cut through his thick skin, and he let out a strangled cry as he fell to the sand. The crowd fell silent. For a moment, everything was still. Rixara stood over her defeated opponent, her breath heavy but steady. She had done it. She had defeated Hrock. But it wasn't just her victory. It was a victory for everything she had fought for. The respect she had earned, the lessons she had learned, and the future she was beginning to see. As the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, the crowd erupted into applause, louder than ever before. Rixara's heart swelled with pride, but this time she didn't feel alone. Derek was there, his eyes filled with admiration. And for the first time in her life, Rixara realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to fight alone anymore. The arena was alive with noise. The crowd roared. A wave of energy that filled every corner of the vast structure. The battle between Rixara and Hrock had been intense, a fight that no one would soon forget. As Rixara stood victorious over the defeated warlord, her breath steadying, she couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. For the first time in her life, the arena wasn't just a place to prove herself. It had become a place where she had earned true respect. Rixara's heart raced as she stood tall, her blade still in hand, the tip touching the sand beneath her. Hrock lay motionless, defeated. His massive body, once filled with power and rage, now seemed strangely vulnerable. The arena was silent for a moment, the air thick with the shock of what had just happened. Rixara turned her head slowly, her four eyes scanning the crowd. The faces that had once sneered at her, mocked her for being different, now looked on with awe. Their expressions had shifted from ridicule to something much more powerful: respect. It wasn't just the crowd, though. From the stands, Rixara could see Derek standing, his expression one of admiration. His eyes met hers across the arena, and for the first time Rixara saw a look of complete understanding in his gaze. He knew what this moment meant to her. He had believed in her when no one else had, and now the victory was shared between them. The announcer's voice boomed through the air, and the winner is Rixara, the four-eyed champion. The crowd erupted once more, their cheers echoing off the stone walls of the arena. But the noise felt different now. It wasn't just the sound of excitement, it was the sound of recognition. The sound of an audience that had finally seen her for what she was, a true warrior. Rixara felt her legs shake beneath her, but she stood firm. She had fought this battle not just for herself, but for the respect that had always been denied. To her, the road to this moment had been long and filled with doubt, but she had proven herself in ways she had never imagined. But it wasn't just the crowd that was changing. Rixara could feel a shift within herself as well. The feelings of loneliness that had once consumed her were beginning to fade. She wasn't just a fighter anymore. She was a champion, someone whose strength had earned the admiration of those around her. But more than that, she had learned something crucial. That strength, true strength, wasn't about fighting alone. It was about fighting alongside those who believed in you. As Rixara made her way to the edge of the arena, the sounds of the crowd still echoing in her ears, Derek made his way down to meet her. The arena floor felt like a dream under her feet. The fight had been real, but the applause, the cheers, the way they saw her, it all felt surreal. Derek reached her just as she was about to leave the arena. He stood tall, his expression warm but serious. There was no mockery in his eyes, no judgment, just admiration and respect. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You proved everything you've been fighting for." Rixara took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the weight of the moment. She nodded slowly, her voice quiet but strong. "I didn't just fight for myself," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I fought for the respect I deserve. For the recognition that's always been out of reach.